Okay, we are live. Welcome back, spiritual practitioners. This season, we are centering learning.
That's right. We're your host, Biani and Sequoia, and we're here to dive into the heart of our conversations, focusing on the lack of culturally rooted resources to support QT BIPOC folks navigating religious and spiritual trauma.
In our previous seasons, we emphasized the importance of unlearning, decolonizing, and divesting from oppressive teachings and institutions. If you're new here, welcome, and make sure to check out our previous episodes on our channel. Now we're dedicated to deepening our knowledge and understanding so that we can better support ourselves and our clients.
As we navigate this season of learning, we aim to provide you with the tools, tips, and insights to help you on your path of reclaiming to soul work.
Whether you're well versed in spiritual practices or just beginning your journey, join us as we explore the intersectional impact of religious and spiritual trauma on mental health.
So sit back, relax, and get ready to elevate your understanding of mental health and spiritual well being as we embark on this season of learning. Let's get started. All right, y'all. Welcome back. We are so excited to really not only just have this episode, but we have three special guests that we've been sort of in community with or in conversation with for months now. So this episode has been maybe the one that I've been most eagerly anticipating. And part of it is because we're talking about Black church and Black church culture. And we're doing a deep dive of it today. We're also talking about what it means to survive the Black church. And we're going to explore religious trauma through that lens. And, something that Sequoia and I have been talking about, there's some unique elements within Black church culture that don't get enough attention, especially when it comes to religious trauma. And, we're having this conversation right now because it needs to be had. And it's not being talked about at all. So, y'all, we are here and excited to dive in. Okay. But before we continue, beautiful people, please, if you haven't done so already, make sure you give this episode a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll help other amazing folks like you find us. And we really want to continue to grow the spiritual therapist and practitioner space, especially for people who are really committed to helping Black QT plus folks heal. So they need to find us, right? And they can only find us if you subscribe now to our channel. And we really can't do it without your support. So thank you for being in community. And thank you for supporting Reclaim Soul Work podcast. All right, y'all.
I know we are so excited to have you all here with us, especially our guests. So we just want to say welcome again. Reclaiming Soul Work is a heart-centered podcast by two queer Black femme healers and spiritual social workers who explore the intersection of magic, spirituality, mental health, and everything in between. My name is Sequoia. I use she and her pronouns, and I am clearly one half of the Reclaiming Soul Work podcast. I am currently in Charlotte, North Carolina on Catawba Indigenous land. My big three are Aquarius Sun, Aries Moon, Libra Rising. I wear a number of different hats as it relates to the other things that I do outside of this podcast. But I am excited to hear more about Biani and what we're sharing with folks today. I didn't bring like a share and tell kind of thing with me today. Did you, Biani?
I brought this book that I talked about last time.
Okay.
But I didn't really, and I wanted to show it to everybody.
Yeah.
So, y'all, my name is Biani, and I got the sexy, raspy voice today because Mercury retrograde is doing his work on me. So you're going to have to just enjoy this raspy voice. sometimes it annoys me when people are like, does your voice really sound like that? And I want to be like, yes, it does. But today it's uniquely filled with a cold. Um, so I use she, they pronouns. I identify as a Black Dominican non binary femme, and I live and play in Lenape-Hoking, also called Philadelphia. And um, I'm originally from New York City, I guess the Bronx, Muncie Lenape territory. And my big three, I'm just going to say I'm a Virgo sun and I'm feeling the Virgo ness right now. Because I was the one stuck in traffic all day. Every meeting I got to was late, just feeling like Mercury's doing its thing. And if some of y'all are struggling with Mercury retrograde right now, sending so much love to you. Um, and yeah, I think what I wanted to talk about, I'm still reading this book, When Religion Hurts You, Healing from Religious Trauma and the Impact of High Control Religion by Laura Anderson. And if you are somebody who wants to learn more about religious trauma, I think this is a good place to start. She really is trauma informed, and not in the superficial way that everybody says they're trauma informed. Like, it's really rooted in like somatic practices. She even talks about how religious trauma is complex PTSD, which I agree with. And I just really appreciate the language that she uses, and it's so accessible. So, maybe we have to bring, this author one day. Maybe if you're watching us, Laura, I think this is such a great book to start with on this journey. And, oh, hello. I'm just reading the comments. Hey, Brock.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks for letting us know where you at. And for those who are watching live with us, please let us know where you're coming from. We want to hear from you. We want to connect with you. But yeah, this book is really sort of resonating for me.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say thank you for continuing to highlight this book, and we've mentioned it quite a bit, like in our one-on-one meetings. We've kind of referenced it. Biani has pulled it out whenever we've kind of been talking about something, and there is this connection to what's been mentioned in the book already. So I'm excited to dive more into it, and I feel bad I didn't bring anything.
You brought yourself.
Okay, okay. Thank you for making me feel better about that. Yeah, I don't have anything for this week. But I feel like we've been like sharing this book together. So I'm just gonna hop on
Yeah,
here.
that's right. We are. Yes.
Okay. All
And I'm
right.
loving, we got some folks coming from the lands of Dene. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it, Lillian.
Dinaina
Deneina.
Athabaskins. That's
Oh
Lillian.
yes.
Thank you for being here, Lillian.
Hey Lillian.
Yeah. I would love to
Adrian.
hear more about
Ooh.
your experiences with religious trauma, Lillian. Just related to your context and understanding of things. Hey, yeah, I would be very interested in that anyway.
Yes, yes. If y'all, those who are tuning in, please share your experiences with religious trauma with us. We'd love to hear it. Yes, let's get back into it. Let's get started.
Okay. Okay. All right. So why are we exploring religious trauma, right? And we continue to bring up this question to ground other therapists and spiritual practitioners that are coming across our channel, especially if you're looking at our kind of topic flow throughout the seasons, and then it's like bam, we're on religious trauma. So just so that folks continue to understand like why we feel like this is such an important topic to center. We have talked about the intersectional aspects of religious trauma. So, gender in church, church culture, patriarchy, sexuality. These are some of the kind of topics, themes that you run across, you get introduced to, in church. You understand that context within the religious context. And then, what does that mean when you are deconstructing or just exploring other aspects of why you think the way that you think, why you feel the way that you feel, and what the source of those feelings and ideologies are. You know, I identify as black, and there is absolutely some grounding in like my understanding of, I'll say, like relationships, sexuality, social justice, have this religious kind of context to it. And doing my own work, I came to understand that and know that that is a place that some of my context comes from, right? And so what does that mean? So that is ultimately what I'll add about why we're centering this conversation now. Biani, did you want to add anything before we move on?
I, I also want to say we're centering this conversation because we want to center the experiences of Black QT plus folks. Because anytime we hear about religious trauma, it doesn't include the experiences of our people, and we really feel like it's important to center those experiences. But yeah, adding to everything that Sequoia says, and yeah, that's where I'll end. So let's continue now. This is the moment that we've all been waiting for. Let me stop. Drum roll. We're really excited for our guests to join us now, and they're each going to introduce themselves. These are the hosts of the Surviving the Black Church podcast. Nikki G, Jonathan, and Hugh, welcome, y'all. Welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Please feel free to introduce yourselves. Whoever wants to start.
Go ahead, Hugh. Go ahead.
I guess I'll start. Hi, everybody. I'm Hugh. I am 1/3 of the co-hosting team of Surviving the Black Church. I am so elated and delighted and thrilled to be here tonight with Sequoia and Blaney. And I'm just I'm excited to dive into this discussion. I'm excited to be on this podcast. I'm excited to be launching our season 2. I'm excited to be amongst my colleagues, Nikki G and Jonathan. And yeah, I'm excited. So yeah. Hi.
Okay, I guess I'll go. I am Nikki G. I'm a certified trauma recovery coach, and I support survivors who have come out of narcissistic abuse, religious trauma, and cult involvement. Myself, unfortunately, and then I find fortunately now, because of the work that I do, found myself in 5 different cults over the course of my life. So, my heart desire is to help support people, especially within the Black community, who are trying to identify if they've been in a cult, if they're trying to understand what it looks like, because sometimes our peoples, we think, oh, well, that's just for the Wahites. That's not for us. That's Jim Jones and them. That's not us, right? But I am working on supporting through education, through speaking. All right, Sequoia, now why are you laughing? I'm gonna be me, okay? I didn't come up with that terminology, so somebody else did. I'm just passing it on. But we have this misconception that because we're Black, that we are immune to cult involvement. And I would even say there are probably some more cults in our environment, in our community, than we would actually lend to agree with. So, that is the work that I'm doing. My signs, I'm she, her. I identify she, her, and I am in Dallas, Texas. Sequoia is really loud. I'm in Dallas, Texas, and my sign, I am a Pisces sun. So, Biani, I love connecting with Virgo. So, something about you, I knew it was something with the Virgo. So, I'm Pisces sun. I am a Sag moon, and I'm a Gemini rising. And I don't have the book in front of me, but the book that I'm going through bit by bit, because it's so meaty, it's called Breaking Their Will. And it's by a lady named Janet Heimlich, who is the daughter of the man who coined the phrase, the Heimlich maneuver. And it is about religious child mistreatment. And it goes into depth about how religious can be harmful and how it affects children. And so I've been kind of combing through that now because I'm in the tail ends of getting my certification as an adolescent support specialist. And my specificity will be with children who are in families where it's very cultish or they're part of toxic religious communities. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit about me. But what I'm currently watching, I just finished House of Dragon, which I'm very upset about the finale. So I like stuff like that. I like Marvel. I like anything nerdy with, sci-fi stuff like that. So that's just a little bit about me. And I'll just leave it at that.
Can somebody's can I add? I barely said anything. I didn't.
It's okay, you go ahead.
I didn't introduce myself in a proper way, so I just said I'm excited. I thank you, Nikki, for leading the way and giving such a beautiful introduction as you always do. Um, I am Hugh. I am a crisis counselor. I am a survivor of narcissistic abuse. I am also a survivor of religious trauma. I grew up in the Black church. I ran out when I was 18 years old. I have wanted nothing. I haven't had anything to do with it since, other than this podcast. I didn't really realize the impact that that church had on me until I was almost 30. And so and convening with Nikki and Jonathan. And so, yeah, I am a Taurus. So tail end of the Taurus, the May 20th. Some people call that a Gemini. I don't. I don't associate myself as a Gemini. No offense to Geminis, but I'm a Taurus. What I'm currently watching, Industry is like the show that I've been like really hooked on, and it's coming back August 11th. And so I've worked sales, tech sales, so I can really relate to the characters. It's just a very interesting show about people working, bankers, investment bankers. And so it's coming back August 11th, and I just can't wait. I'm devouring it. Yeah, and I'm currently going back to school for forensic psychology, psychoanalysis, and so finally got some funding and figuring out the programs and all of that. So that's great. And I'm also launching my company, which is a author. Basically, it's a book. I'm launching my book, which is coming out beginning of Q1 of next year, which is all about healing through humor, not so much of like how people relate to humor is as kind of a weapon, but I kind of wanted to do it as write about it in a way where you can actually gain strength and power from it to heal. And so that's what the kind of overarching theme of the book that is coming out, that is coming out. And it's basically about my experiences with narcissistic abuse. And there's a little bit of religious trauma thrown in, but that's going to be for the sequel mostly. So I'm just setting the tone. And yeah, so thank you so much. And thank you for letting me reintroduce myself. Jonathan, you're on mute.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, because I tried to unmute you. So that means that your microphone isn't connected or something. Okay. All right. Until Jonathan can return, um, shall we try to get into a little bit of our religious
Yeah, let's
conversation?
for sure, for sure. I'm just really grateful to hear your like backgrounds. It kind of gives me some sort of like understanding about what brought you to this work. So I'm really grateful, and it's thank you. Um, we're we're curious about. I mean, we're going to talk about a few things. Hopefully, we can get it. We can get into it. But one of the first questions are around like the challenges that Black, queer, and trans folks face, and sort of the kind of experiences that are traumatic that they possibly had in Black church that you all may have seen or experienced, or like even in your work. What are some of the challenges that Black, queer, and trans folks experience in Black church? culture, would you
And
say? Yeah.
I want to pop in here really quickly because I want to see Jonathan
Oh, you see,
back.
okay.
Yeah, so I just want to give space
Mhm.
for Jonathan to be able to
Yes,
introduce
please.
himself.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can I be heard? Okay. I'm going to try to get through this. I'm having some connection issues, but we're going to do the best that we can. My name is Jonathan. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm based in the Maryland area. I'm a therapist. I'm on the Piscataway land of Maryland. I think that's what it is. The three signs for me, I'm an Aquarius rising, Taurus moon, and a Aries sun. Um, and yeah, I'm also co-host of Surviving the Black Church podcast. And I am just excited about this conversation. And without further ado, I don't want to spend too much time on my introduction. I'm looking forward to diving deep into this conversation about religious trauma.
Thank you so
Welcome.
much. Yes, thank you so much. I know that we've been having a little bit of technical difficulties, so no worries. We started off talking about Mercury, so no problem. And so Biani, you were kind of ushering us into a conversation about Black, queer, and trans folks' experiences in the church. And I think it's important to, or what I'll try to center with this conversation initially. Biani and I have talked about things like we did an IG live on conversion therapy. We've talked about, as I mentioned, we've had like two conversations on intersectionality and religious trauma, basically like highlighting nuanced conversations around that. And I think that this conversation about Black, queer, and trans folks' experiences, specifically in Black churches, we center this conversation for a number of different reasons. I identify as queer, grew up Southern Baptist, went to a Christian private school until I was in eighth grade. Um, and was really connected to the church that I grew up in until I went to high school. And then after that, I was able to start making my own decisions about, what I wanted to practice and be committed to and things like that. So I mean, I would kind of offer to like, yeah, like with you all's work, could you give a little bit more context to what you've seen and supported on?
Yeah, Jonathan was supposed to lead out in
Yeah.
that question, especially because of what his orientation is. But I can just start off and say, growing up in aside from my family of origin, which I kind of liken that to my first cult dynamic, the church I got saved in, was a Baptist church. And coming from the Black community, we know the stigmas. That's a no-no. You don't even talk about it. There's a lot of suppression of curiosity, a lot of suppression of even getting to the point of saying, this is how I want to orient myself in my sexuality. And we're seeing more and more survivors, even in the Black community, like usually the work that I do with survivors, sexuality is usually the area they don't want to touch. They can talk about, the abusive practices. They can talk about the love bombing and the gaslighting. They come in talking about, yeah, they gaslighted me and everything like that. But when we talk about sexuality, it's kind of like, can we move on? They're not ready to touch that. And part of me feels like, particularly the Black church has a lot to do with the indoctrination, where many survivors, even after being out of the church dynamic, are afraid to touch that. And I have a lot of reasons as to why. I think the biggest one is, and I'm just going to be candid, you don't touch that part of you, otherwise you're going to bust hell wide open. We know the type of phrases that we hear in the Black church. And so, processing and recovering from religious trauma, there's so many different areas, that we need to touch. But I find when we get to the area of sexuality, that really depicts on a person's humanity, and it's so sacred. And sometimes that wound is so raw, it takes years before they're able to touch it. So I'll just start off with that. And Jonathan's back.
Can I be heard? Okay. I don't know what the question was. I'm so sorry. I'm having a hard time tonight. Sorry.
It's okay. We are glad that you're here. It's really okay. Um, I am really grateful for the conversations that we're having. And I'm kind of looking in the comments here. Some of the folks that are tuning in are also sharing their experiences. But we're sort of starting off talking about the challenges that Black, queer, and trans folks face in the Black church, and those traumatic experiences that folks who are listening or tuning in or watching should be listening out for, paying attention to. But yeah, focus on like what the challenges are coming up in the Black church as a Black, queer, and trans person. Excuse me.
I mean, I think that there's definitely rejection when it comes to queer and trans folks as far as the Black church is concerned. I know I've had some of my personal experiences, especially growing up within the Pentecostal Holiness Church, where it was love based on conditions, and you will die and go to hell if you do not repent, if you do not convert to an identity that is congruent with the love that God has for you. And you're an abomination before the Lord. And I think that that is the entirety of the experience that many LGBTQ folks experience, is being rejected and outcasted by these institutions and these systems that are really not in this position of really helping people to move towards a relationship with God, but it's more of just fearing God. Because if you don't change who you are and your identity, then you're going to a place that you can't return. You can't remove yourself from. So that's what I wanted to speak to and contribute to this conversation, is just the different ways that rejection shows up by individuals who reject folks in that way. So yeah.
I think that's huge, and just in the sense of it being an initial wound, or like that. I want to say the first wound, but that's not, you know, along those lines. Like this wounding that you carry, this rejection feeling that you have, it has this religious foundation, and it's not just associated with, especially for like Black folks, it's not like what I see her related to some white folks experiences with church, right? Where you just go to service and then you leave. You might do some community service, and then that's kind of where the connections extend to. With Black folks, it's not just religious practices, right? Like, we're talking about community people, like people that you consider family at times, and so to have those experiences can definitely be just heartbreaking, and I think that it is important for even therapists and practitioners who work with folks who do not identify as queer themselves, right? Because we've all kind of seen how at least the culture has these impacts, So I didn't know if anybody wanted to speak to any of that or beyond me. Um, oh, I was gonna say if I didn't ask the question in the right sequence.
I think that it really has like kind of a reverberating effect on how you express yourself in the church. I think a lot of even if you're not, if you don't identify um, as queer, I think it has a really negative impact on the way that you express yourself in the church. I know that when I was growing up, I was in the choir, and that was really big for me, but I was just really unable. It was really seen as obviously bad and negative to, like, it was shunned, obviously, seen as like bad and negative if you were that, or if you were, queer in the church, black church. And so even if you weren't, I mean, I don't know how to make this, like, I remember I was doing a solo, I think it was like 12 or 13 or something like that. And I mean, I couldn't even really move. I couldn't really sing and express myself in any way. Like, I didn't even have an issue with it myself. I feel like everybody kind of internalizes some of it, but even if you don't care, right? Like, if you don't really, it will be shut down, like your way of being expressing yourself. So I really kind of bombed this solo, and it took me years to realize um why, there was a lot of queer antagonism in the church. Even if you're not queer, and if you're a male, you can't express yourself in certain ways in the church. And so um it just has this like overarching effect that I think people don't realize inadvertently affects them negatively, even if they themselves are perpetrators of queer antagonism in the church. And so I really feel like it's something that becomes an issue for everyone in the church it's to resolve. Even if you think it's not something that's like directly negatively impacting you, I would actually make the argument that it is, in many ways that you're just not seeing. And so, yeah.
It's funny because when you started out talking about the choir, I was like, isn't that queer as fuck? Like being in a choir
Yeah.
in a black church. Like, I don't know. I
Yeah.
think there's something about this idea that queer antagonism, and we mentioned this in the last episode, that there's this way that the more faithful you are to Christianity, like it's tied to being antagonistic. Like the more queer antagonistic you are, the more faithful you are to to Christianity. And I think there's ways too that, I mean, the fact that you couldn't really sing, Hugh, right? Like you couldn't really be yourself.
Nope.
It's its own, deep piece around the trauma, like the deepness around the trauma. Something you said, Nikki, earlier made me think around how the sexuality piece you see with clients, that folks can't even really go there yet to even talk about sexuality. And in thinking about this book that I've been reading slowly too, that it's like that deep, that deep of the trauma wound, right? That you can't even really get in touch with that part of yourself fully until you're really like healed from the other parts or something. Like it feels like there's so many layers beneath that. And yeah, I did have a question, but I lost it. But yeah, I was just thinking about you singing, Hugh, and thinking about how, what a disservice, right? Where your true voice really couldn't shine fully, or yourself. You couldn't really be yourself, that deep rejection. Okay, let's get back into
I
it.
was about to do Joyful Joyful. I was about to start singing now. You almost brought it up.
I might want you to sing at the end. You might have to close out for us.
You might, yeah.
So what are some things y'all think like spiritual therapists or practitioners should know about? like, okay, so here's some things that I feel like this is where it's coming from. I find that a lot of the conversations about religious trauma, outside of my experience of your podcast, have been very white, very true. What Nikki was saying, very like bland and sanitized, and it kind of talks about Christianity in a way that does not resonate for me, even as a Latinx person. And what we find too, I find it a lot in my work with Black, queer, and trans folks who are spiritual, but are really healing from the religious trauma wound and don't really feel connected to church, but they miss it, right? Like they miss parts of it. They miss like the choir, they miss the community piece. And also holding that, even though they feel like they miss that community piece, they never really felt a part of the community too. Um, and so we're wanting to bring in the space because we feel like if you are really doing religious trauma work as a therapist, but you don't talk about Black church, or you don't talk about Latinx churches, or you don't talk about churches where our people are coming from, then you're just like scratching the surface a little bit, you know? And so I wonder if you all can speak to like things that therapists or practitioners should be paying attention to when it comes to like Black church culture, or like what makes the religious trauma experience unique for folks who are surviving Black churches.
Well, I'm not a therapist, but I am a coach, and I'll just start off and say that
Yes.
I'll start off and say that this space definitely needs some seasoning, some Lowry's, okay? Some let me not run it down because I'm a little hungry, but this space talking about religious trauma needs definitely our voices, our experiences, the nuance of what we've experienced, and um I'll cut them some bail a little bit and say that a lot of them, from those who I've talked to, don't really know how to touch it, right? They may see a video of Kim Burrell, they may see a video of Juanita Bynum going off, or something that's happening in the Black church space, and they're like, "Oh my, that's a lot," and they're kind of like, "Woo." But yet they're the ones that are creating the models, and they're defining what the experiences are without including us. But doesn't that speak to the overall mental health industry in and of itself? Like, don't let me get started with that. But I think a lot of us have to come to the table, right? A lot of us have to do reclaiming soul work. A lot of us have to start podcasts and writing books and actually sitting with survivors and having the conversations. Our experiences are different. Growing up in the Black church, church mamas, the prophets of the house, you didn't go against them, okay? If you even thought that you felt depressed, you go to the front of the church, they're going to pray that that mental health spirit out of you. There was no, okay, I need to go see a practitioner. Growing up in the Black church, you were shunned in the church, you were shunned at home. And so there's just a lot of the way we express faith is different. You didn't feel good unless you got that shout out on a Sunday morning and a Sunday evening and a Wednesday afternoon, and Bible study on Friday, and the children on the pew laid out at 9 o'clock because choir rehearsal went over for an hour. Like, our experiences are different, and it's impacted us in a different way. And so I remember one time I was in a social media space. I'm not going to really clarify what it is, but Jonathan and Hugh know what I'm talking about. And a white therapist, God bless her, she wanted to start, conversations around religious trauma. And, people started to unmic, and I think I already told them myself, and share some of their experiences. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I can resonate with that, because I've been in both the Black church culture and the predominantly white church culture, the political church. Like, pick a flavor of lemonade. I've experienced it, unfortunately, but I was like, okay, I can rock with that. And then a sister got on stage and started to talk. And she started talking about her husband and the witchcraft that was being sent against her when she tried to divorce, and the leaders were doing this and it. And after she shared everything, I'm tracking with her, not my experience, but I'm tracking with her. The person who was running that space was like, okay, thank you for sharing, and just did not say anything to her. with other people's stories, though, she met them where they were, and offering condolences and validated their experiences, even defined some of the things they went through, but she did not know what to do with her story. And she and I, the Black sister, we're still cool to this day, because I was like, look, I know what you're going through, I understand that, but that's what we need, right? We need someone to be able to witness our grief and say, that is a lot that you've been through. So I'm hoping that more spaces pop up where we can talk about all these areas of Black religious trauma, how it's impacted us, and what do we do now? What do the modalities look like now? It's not going to look like what's offered in the typical religious trauma recovery space. We have tarot, we have African spirituality, we have sound, we have song, there's certain storytelling. I know people put down a lot in the mental health space, talk therapy, but for us, we got to talk, we got to sing. It is embedded in us as a people. So what does that look like when we pioneer that work that speaks to our experiences, and the modalities can feed our people? And so I'm just rambling, but those are my thoughts.
Not a rambling. You gave us all the seasoning, honey. All the seasoning.
Yeah, to add to that, I just wanted to just say that the way that there are therapists that are on this session, the way that we have been trained as mental health professionals needs to be confronted and challenged, because we are not trained to serve diverse people of diverse backgrounds. And I'm just talking about as a field, or as a mental health professional condition. At least I didn't get the training I got the training on my own about Black people. But historically, Western psychology and mental health was never designed for Black people in mind. And so it was almost as if this field was created for them and not for us. And therefore, our experiences are overlooked or minimized, downgraded, degraded, dehumanized. And let's just start there. And I think even just in my career and my frustrations towards the career of just how mental health and psychology just does not include, it doesn't even offer, it offers biopsychosocial, but the spiritual component isn't really included in the assessment and the understanding and the conceptualization of the client. And therefore, I think with spiritual therapists working with clients who have a religious trauma background, not just a religious trauma background, but also a Black client who has a religious trauma background, needs to be educated, aware, and mindful of the unique cultural, social, and spiritual dynamics that can impact that client's mental health and their well-being. And understanding those factors can really enhance the therapeutic alliance with that particular client, and provide more effective support. Because like Nikki said, like historically, the role of the church in the Black community has served as that support system. It was an anchor. It was a refuge. And it was even after the church services, they provided aftercare for those people that were part of those environments. And it's almost like when I hear conversations about religious trauma, it's just like throw the whole baby out with the bath. Like, it doesn't work like that with Black people, because we're a spiritual people. We are highly spiritual beings living out this human experience. And so you can't just throw away the entire experience and say, oh, we can just focus on deconstruction of our belief system, of our faith. It doesn't work that way, because it's not this or that, it's both and I think that's something that we need to consider when treating and working with diverse populations, is not to just look at the religious trauma, look at the whole person. And so, yeah, that's what I would offer to that question.
And I honestly, I would, I just wanted to piggyback off of Jonathan. I really feel like, a lot of harm can be done um, by a therapist that's not competent. You could re-injure somebody going into that. It's extremely difficult to find, um, it's just extremely difficult for us to find people that are not going to just flat out harm us when we go into a therapist's office after these really, really horrific experiences. I always think about, imagine you go to get help and you get harmed. And so I think that's the other thing that we are trying to do with our podcast is to kind of create a network um, of healers that we feel that we vetted, that we've kind of, that we know that are anchored in our people, that are anchored in um, what it is exactly that we need, and that is going to uplift us. And it's just so, I almost want to say it's impossible to really get the nurturing. I don't want to say it's impossible. I want to say currently it's almost impossible to kind of find the nurturing and healing that is required for us as a people. And so I think that's what we're really trying to do with the podcast, with the network that we're creating, with the network that we're creating of healers, of practitioners, of people that voodoo practitioners, therapists, counselors, coaches, etc. And so that's one of our biggest goals and one of our biggest priorities in this podcast. And I'm glad that I'm able to kind of share that and really share that and bring that to y'all tonight on your podcast.
Thank you, y'all. I'm really sitting with everything that you all have shared. Yeah, I'll just say that. I think what's staying with me, Jonathan, is this idea that it's true. A lot of harm is being done by folks in our profession, by us, and that invitation to really hold, like cultural competence. And then Nikki, I'm hearing too how we're hearing. I know therapists are scared to get into it, to talk about Black church trauma, because they don't want to seem racist, or they don't want to seem like, there's a lot of layers to that conversation that we need to get into. Maybe it's a different episode, but yeah, I'm with y'all on that. I want to kind of shift into, I want to talk a little bit about cult culture, because we've been talking about it, and we won't be doing a deep dive because maybe we just need to do another episode. But I think it's something that folks who are listening in or watching us might be like, well, what what is cult culture? What should we be knowing about cult culture in like Black churches, right? And I think there's some subtleties and nuances around it that I think our listeners, our therapists, our practitioners need to know. So could y'all tell us, I mean, maybe some of the stuff that's come up in your podcast, in terms of like, what are the signs of a cult within Black churches that we should be paying attention to?
I was going to say the music. I just think the music is really an invitation, specifically in the Black church. It's not really like, it's not a sign specifically, but I do think it's like, it's so evocative, it's so powerful, it's so stirring, it's so, people, we literally get up and in the middle of a service and feel that we are saved when we're being abused, right? And it's because I really feel like it's the music that's really, it's not just the music, but obviously, but I think that's a huge part of it. So I just really feel like I'm just gonna say the music.
Like the music is seductive, alluring. Like what do you mean?
It puts you in a trance. It really, like, if you've had a horrible week and you go to Sunday, right, and then you just get that music, you're gonna, and you just hear this music, this seductive, this trance, this I mean, I'm just hearing the songs in my head now, and I'm just being taken right back to my childhood. And it was, I honestly, it's some of my favorite parts of the church, right? Like of that. And so it's just, to me, it's like almost like a calling card. It's almost like a version of love bombing, um, in the Black church, in terms of it's an abusive spiritual practices in the Black church. I really kind of feel like the music is a sort of a version of love bombing. Um, and that's just my, we've talked about this on the podcast a little. I think we've touched it at some point. But I think I don't I it's a sign. I don't want to say it's a sign. It's not a bad thing, the music. It's just, I do think it's really, I think we should stop and like kind of think about what's going on in our bodies when we're in the church, when we hear that music, and you know, we've had these kinds of weeks or whatever. What is it calling us to do? Um and yeah, I just think it's something we should think about.
Yeah, I'll jump in with that as well. Music is definitely a tool that can be used in environments that are cultish, to bring people under some form of hypnosis. And when it comes to the Black church, we don't want to talk about that because it's so close to the chest. I mean, we are a musical people, whether you're inside the church or not. When we look at the history of who we are, all of our singers and our rappers, a lot of them, engineers, the orators and the poets came out of the Black church. And so to imagine seeing music used in church in a cultish way, that sounds so foreign to us. But for some communities that are cultish within the Black church, it can put you in a state of hypnosis where now you are. I heard this person say, the definition of entertainment is being detained so something can enter you. Now I don't know how true that is, but when you talk about the power of music, it almost is kind of suspending part of your logical brain, and you're just taking everything in. And being a part of one of the particular cults I was a part of, that's out in Kansas City. It's been in the news since last October with all the scandal that's been there. Music, even though it wasn't a Black church, but music was a big part of how they reeled people in and how they kept people there. And so, but when you talk about cults, like I said earlier, there's a lot of misconceptions that we have as a people about cults. We think, oh, that's just for the uneducated, or that's for someone that's just severely traumatized that it was inevitable that they will find themselves in a cult, or that's for the naive. They never seem to really know what to do to protect themselves. So I could understand Sister So and so being a part of a cult. Then there's a lot of misconceptions that cults are only religious. And there are many types of cults. You have family cults. Like I said, my first cult felt like, my family of origin. There are political cults. There are racist and terrorist type of cults. There are sex cults, right? There are cults on social media, online communities. It's no longer just brick and mortar in 2024. There's a cult of one, that type of personality. There's a cult in the conscious community. And for us as a people, and desiring to really know our identity and where we come from, and understanding a lot of our history has been whitewashed, you know, we're turned up a little bit more to want to know. So all you need is a brother, fill in the blank, to come along and say, hey, I've been in the mountain of Tibet for 5 years, and, I only eat grass and air, and all my chakras are aligned. And I have the one of the 3 copies in the world of the book that will tell us as a people how to advance. And they come off very charismatic. You start to think, well, wow, this person really knows the past, the present, and even what we should do in the future. Sometimes in the Black community, you get a lot of cult leaders that are, often narcissistic. They're very demonstrative and boisterous, and they're yelling and screaming, and you're like, oh, okay, I can see from afar that's the cult leader. But the ones that are really, it's the covert ones, the ones that don't lift their voices too much, the ones that have the false humility, the ones that, encourage you in your faith and your relationship with God, and to surrender, and can almost kind of read through you. And those are the ones that really pull those who are more susceptible, and we can find ourselves in that place of susceptibility when we've had losses, or a divorce, a breakup, a loss of a job, or a desire for more, a desire to say, you know what, it's 2024. I don't know what's going to happen with this election. Everybody is crazy. I need to connect to something spiritual. Or I'm just feeling a pull, an ancient pull to connect with something spiritual, but I don't know how to do that. But I was on Instagram and I saw a brother so and so or sister so and so. She's got a big following. She's just saying the right thing. So I'm going to keep checking it out and checking it out. And next thing I know, 2 years later, my friends don't know who I am anymore. My family hardly sees me because now I'm going to all the retreats in Costa Rica to follow this person because they seem to be so charismatic and to know what I'm supposed to do with my future. And so it doesn't always look like Jim Jones. It doesn't always look like David Koresh. It doesn't always look like the documentaries we see on Netflix. And by the way, I'm hoping that more people, hopefully I'm one of them, that will pierce that veil, so to speak, of cults only look like white people. They're only white cults, because there are a lot of cults that are in our community, and I think the conversation needs to happen a whole lot more than it is. But I think as a people, because we feel like we can't be, drawn into a cult, we don't see that we're in a cult. And religious trauma and cult involvement often go hand in hand. A lot of clients I've worked with, groups I've led, people did not realize they were in a cult till they were informed. And so, we talked about on one episode of our podcast about there's this misconception that love and abuse should coexist. And as a people, we've been indirectly taught that. We've been indoctrinated with that knowledge that, well, there's a little bit of truth here. There's a little bit of truth what the pastor says. So it's okay if they stand me up in the middle of Sunday service and say, "Thus saith the Lord, you better leave that so-and-so alone, or he's going to strike you dead." Like, we make exceptions for abuse because we were taught that it's supposed to coincide. And that's the furthest from the truth. So exiting these spaces even looks like redefining what love is, understanding what abuse is, right? In our language, with our people in our community. I'm kind of going all over the place, but signs or markers that you've been in a cult. Like I said earlier, the leader presents him or herself as the know-it-all, the God ordained. They usually have a God complex. They dictate how members should think, how they should live. There is a model by, he's a white guy, but Dr. Stephen Hassan, called the BITE model. And he talks about how cult members are retained in these communities, because people say the door is open, just get up and walk out. But psychologically, you are chained into these communities, and it takes breaking through psychologically and emotionally before you can even exit. So the BITE model is behavior control for B, information control for I, thought control for T, and emotional control. And so they control how you feel, with guilt and manipulation and shame. And so, they control what you're thinking. You think that this is the only person that will understand you and know how to lead you through the end times that we may be in. The information only should come from the leader because they know what's best for you. And behavior, well, I need to suppress my curiosity in my area of sexuality because I've been taught that I'm not even supposed to touch that. Otherwise, I'm going to hell. So, I can go on and on and on, but, there are certain things that we need to really, really look for. I see somebody in the comments, the push and pull. Oh, you are called and anointed and appointed, Biani, to go to the nations. And, you are called to speak to injustice. And, all of a sudden your identity is like, whoa, yeah, I like that. But then, after service, they're scolding you, publicly to everyone. So that dynamic often goes hand in hand, and the survivor does not really realize what's happening to them oftentimes until they exit those communities. So I will shut up now.
Nikki, yeah.
Oh, for sure. I'm sorry. I got to piggyback on what she was saying because There is a white elephant in the room that we have not yet unpacked, and I think this might be helpful just in the therapy communities or the healing communities, is to really talk about this trend of the ex-gays projecting this queer antagonistic behavior on social media, in churches, and we're not really understanding what that is, because essentially that is part of the cult like behavior, and there's authority figures who are coming in the form of preaching this kind of ex-gay, there's something wrong with your identity and there's something that you need to do about it. And I think us looking at that feeling of pressure to conform to these extreme strict behavioral codes that conflict with their identity and their values. And I'm speaking from because I've had conversations with people who have gone through conversion therapy or some type of conversion from gay to straight, and there is this pressure of conforming and this fear of divine punishment and damnation and shaming, and it's like an internalized homophobia for not adhering to the dominant cultural norms, that if I have this intense fear inside of me that I can't be who I am, I can't express who I am, but this testimony around conversion is what gets me through the day. And so I think there is some this sense of like endurance that comes from being abused spiritually that happens with the ex-gay experience, where they're telling themselves that my identity is sinful, my identity is immoral, I'm an abomination, because it aligns to the teachings of what I have been told to believe. And so you're creating this type of internal struggle and this battle within the self that only leads to more projection of discrimination, projection of hatred, because it's a self-hate. So the sense of cult behavior is like being forced to suppress this side of myself and this identity in order to fit in order to be liked, in order to be loved by God, in order to receive some type of acceptance from the group or acceptance from above. And there's that pattern of relating to the self and relating to others is harmful and it's destructive, and it forms into cult-like behavior. So I think there's just many conversations and many discussions that we have to talk about in regards to the complexity of belief system and one's identity and how it's conflicting with each other, that is creating some of this antagonistic thinking, antagonistic behavior towards the queer community, the trans community, that we haven't even gotten to the bottom of it. So I think that's what I think about to the question of the cult characteristics, is that there are just these recurring patterns and themes that keep replaying over and over again, that it keeps happening because we're not really getting to the bottom of it. I'll let that marinate.
Yeah, there's so much that we haven't gotten into today, and I feel very like, y'all gotta come back. We need a part two. We
do. We should be back.
Yeah, y'all gonna have to come back, because we've definitely got some more trending topics. And Jonathan, what you mentioned about ex-gays, I feel the same way about this new path of people denouncing everything. Feels like a cult too. There's a whole cult movement of people wanting to denounce Greek life, denounce queerness. Like all of those things are like these performances that we're not getting to the root of. So, I'm really grateful for y'all. And if y'all want a part two, let us know in the comments, because we're gonna have to make this happen sooner than later. So, we're wrapping up, and it's wild to wrap up right now. I feel like, no, stay here forever. But maybe, what we could do to wrap up, I'm curious, if we can kind of shift a little bit into just like, what does recovery look like? You know, like if one of you could share a little bit about what it could look like um, for Black and queer trans folks who survived or surviving the Black church. Nikki, you mentioned about people leaving and like how the journey even begins once they leave a cult. And I guess I'm wondering for y'all, like, what does it look like? What does recovery look like for Black and queer and trans folks who are surviving and are in their journey of recovery? And if it feels like part 2 is where we continue that, then we'll continue it there. But
Well,
I'm
I think
curious.
we can leave a little something, and I hope we can have part two because Jonathan and I were talking about a lot of this yesterday. We haven't even gotten to the part of whiteness and fear of Black advancement. We haven't even talked about fear of retaliation, and
Hmm.
so we haven't talked about how Christian nationalism and a lot of that has actually had a big impact on the Black church, in which they have also perpetuated dehumanization within amongst ourselves because it was modeled.
Mhm.
And Project 2025 and where the government is now, all this is passed down. We're gonna have part 2 and 3. But anyway, um, yeah, recovery first and foremost, I think acknowledgement and awareness. I know that seems so simplistic, but part of the reason why I was in 5 different cults is because I didn't know I was in a cult. Had I known, I don't think I would have continued to repeat the process. I was still looking for a community to belong in, a community that I believed we had shared experiences, we had shared belief system, and I did not take the time in between different cults or toxic groups to really assess what the hell just happened and how what can I do to prevent that from, like, I didn't, how people date, they get out of one relationship, they go into another, and they don't take the time to see, is my picker off? And so my picker was off as far as spiritual communities and in general. It wasn't until I came into awareness, a lot of psychoeducation, and this is way before I decided to do the work that I'm doing now. And I think this is a big key for us as a people, especially in the Black church, because we've been taught historically that everything we need is in the Black church. That's how it was, as we were budding as a people in the Black church. The politicians were there, the journalists were there, everything was there. And that perspective is still embedded in us as a people. So if we have issues with our mental health, we don't go to mental health professionals for what? You go to the altar and you get prayer. If we have issues where we're curiosity and want to explore our sexuality, you don't do that outside. You come and somebody get the oil, and a church mother and a deliverance minister will come and cast out whatever needs to be cast out. And so we still have this in the fishbowl, floating in the ocean mentality, when a lot of us might have to hop out that fishbowl afraid, if you will, and realize there is more out there. So I'm getting down the street as far as recovery, but recovery looks like curiosity, exploring those things that were deemed demonic. And it takes time to get there. This doesn't happen initially, but as the person is ready and able to do so, but then coming into awareness, and Jonathan and I talk about this a lot. The experience of religious trauma, the experience of cult culture, all the stuff we talked about is so dehumanizing. If I want to orient myself a certain way and I've been told no, but deep inside I still have this desire, it's dehumanizing. I am disconnecting myself from who I really am. So recovery looks like, who am I? Who do I want to be now after all of this? How do I want to orient it? What is my perspective on this now? And not being afraid to explore it and then own it and then live it and then be it. And that takes a long time to get there. I am still on that journey myself, but there is hope after all the shit we've been through in a lot of these circles. And I'll wrap it up right there.
You know, I wanted to really piggyback on what Nikki was saying, and I think a lot about recovery looks like, to me, it looks like, what am I used to? Like, what am I used to? Like, what is all I know? Like, if my is the way I connect to God, is that abusive? And is it just, do I just know it as this kind of abusive way of being? Do I know that I'm being abused? Right? Do I even know that? Do I, like, if it, can I say that out loud? You know, recovery really is acknowledgement. It really, for me, it's the first step, is one of the first steps is just acknowledgement. Am I happy? Am I happy in how I'm connecting to God? Why am I coming into church feeling so guilty? Why am I coming into church feeling like I can't be myself, like I can't express myself, like I can't, you know, let's orient in a specific way, right? Like, why do I feel so guilty? And I just think it really, recovery is, it's an enormous feat. It's not easy. Well, it's not easy. It's a very slow, it's very gradual, it's very day by day. There's no magic pill, there's no quick fix, but you know it is worth it, like, right? Like, so I just really like to, just think, how did I get here? Right? Like, how did I get here? um how did I get here? That's what, to me, the first step of recovery to me is, personally.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on all the speakers, and thank you for that. I think it's going to take a little bit of us kind of coming together as people that are healers, and people who are really trying to help people to rest and recover from their experiences, is to continue to create safe spaces for people that are non-judgmental, where individuals can come together and talk about their experiences, talk about their thoughts and their feelings, and to validate, acknowledge, recognize all of the emotions, all of the thoughts, all of the experiences, without minimizing pain, minimizing anything that is being said. And that's what we're trying to do with the podcast. That's what we're trying to do with all the different resources that we're providing. And if it's therapy, trauma-informed approaches that recognize not just religious trauma, but like diverse experiences in the context of religious trauma, that works towards prioritizing safety, trust, empowerment, creating stories, people sharing their stories, helping them to reclaim their identity, foster new meaning for their past experiences, but also, encouraging the idea of exploring different pathways to spirituality that align more deeply to one's values and one's experiences, versus operating in this position of, I have to internalize this belief that dehumanizes me. But what is it? How can you follow your spirituality on your terms, but also supporting the reconstruction and the redevelopment of a new belief system that is affirming, that is empowering, that helps you to kind of move away from the more traumatic aspects of belief and into more of a authentic, affirming, more empowering aspect of belief. And then, coming into community like this and listening to episodes and just learning more about the ways in which you can heal from past experiences can be helpful. But yeah, just learning how to really reorient yourself in a new world with a new identity is the path of recovery.
Thank you, y'all. We are so grateful. And there was so much that was covered tonight. We talked about cults and what to pay attention for in the experience of cults in Black churches. We talked about music and the power of music, the power for good and the power for trances and hypnosis and like kind of, abuse. And we also talked about what recovery can look like. And in between that, we also talked about the nuances of understanding Black religious trauma. And we also talked about a part 2. So, let us know in the comments if that's something you're interested in. So we are at our segment of main takeaways. And, you know, we want to sort of encourage folks who are watching to share in the comments what your main takeaways are from today's episode. What resonated for you, let us know. And yeah, it sounds like a part 2 might have to be in order because our community is like asking for that. I have so many main takeaways, but I think what's resonating for me is around us having a deeper dive about this whole other aspect of the culture and like ex-gays and that whole, the connection between queer antagonism, Christian nationalism, and that's really stayed with me. What about you, Sequoia? What's your takeaway? And then let's hear from the rest of our friends.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you everyone, for your thoughts. Also want to shout out everybody that has joined us on YouTube in the chat and leaving comments, those that are watching us on IG and our other streaming platforms. Thank you all so much. And please definitely, as Biani has offered as well and invited folks to let us know what their main takeaways are as well. I I just have so many thoughts, so many thoughts. But I definitely want to circle back to um why it's important that the religious trauma community get some more seasoning on it. I think that is extremely important to highlight, because I feel like it parallels a lot to um, the spiritual community, so like tarot readers, energy workers, right? All of these other kind of titles that folks hold, just in the sense of spiritual bypassing. Like I feel like practitioners in the religious trauma space, and then some of the spiritual practitioners that we've seen definitely online and of course in the community, there is this spiritual bypassing that happens, that is, yeah, really, really harmful, and I feel like needs definitely more conversation around. um I'm excited for part 2.
Did y'all want to share y'all main takeaways really quickly, or y'all feel good? They're like, oh, we just come back for part 2 and we just keep this conversation going. That's good too.
I'm like I want part 2. I want, yeah. My main takeaways, I learned a lot more about I hate to use the word study, but like I guess I just learned how queer antagonism, plays a part a little bit more, in a different way that I didn't know. I didn't even really realize it until I actually spoke it out, even in this during this podcast, that my movement was so inhibited by something that is not even a part of my identity. So that's something I think maybe hope some other people might relate to. Other cisgendered heterosexual people might relate to, that are in the church. And so that maybe they haven't thought about. So that's just something that was a huge takeaway for me during this podcast.
I really appreciate this conversation, and we need to have more conversations because we have
Yes.
so much to talk about.
Mhm.
I really wish that we can dive deeper on many of these topics. But what the one thing I am taking away that I wanted to say that I didn't say is, and these are for listeners that, because oftentimes inclusion is often misinterpreted. And inclusion doesn't necessarily mean agreement with all aspects of someone's life. It means to create a space where everybody is treated with respect and dignity
Mhm.
despite their identity.
Mhm.
and where their fundamental human rights are validated and acknowledged. Can we even establish that common ground, please? Because that's what we're bringing in, is the humanity of our beings. And also, acceptance means acknowledging and respecting our identity and other people's identities without having to approve of it. And so I just want us to really remember why we're doing this and why we're having these conversations, because it's about the human experience. It's not about this, it's not about that. It's about everybody. So that's what I'm taking away from this conversation. And I'm looking forward to part 2 and part 3 and part 4 and into infinity. Right?
And we're happy to come on your podcast too. So
y'all coming.
Keep this party going.
There's no way y'all getting out of this one. I think my takeaway is the power of community right here. This, and the listeners and those who've been commenting, at least what I can see on my end, there's so much that people were saying. I'm like, yes, I want to speak to that. I couldn't respond because I didn't log in with my YouTube account, but I wanted to reply to so many of the listeners' comments. This energy, this synergy, it's needed. The table is budding and needs to continue to grow, and it's the 5 of us. But what does that look like for other practitioners who may be trying to figure out, do I go in the religious trauma space, do I go in the cult space? I don't know. And really hearing this and saying there's a need here. I mean, obviously you don't just jump in because it's a need. It's more to it than that. But thank you for saying yes to what you've said yes to with this. This is not an easy trauma to talk about, to deal with. It is so complex. We have our own that we're processing through. And just when you think, not that I don't think any of us ever say, okay, I got it. But it's just like, man, I didn't even see the nuance of this and this and this. It's just like, oh my God. It's like, you're trying to untie all the Christmas lights and you think you got it, and there's a ball at the bottom, and you're like, you know what? It's very tempting to just throw it all away. But you all are personally unraveling the Christmas lights of your own experiences so that you can help support others. And that's what it's going to take. I think about statistically, 8 out of 10 Black Americans identify as Christian in this nation. And then I think about supposedly the statistics of Black mental health therapists, or professionals rather, it's about almost 4%. So out of that 4%, and out of that 8 out of 10, how many in that 4% are actually in this lane, in this field right now? Because let me tell you, trying to search for a mental health professional that understands this, that doesn't have biases when it comes to, because I have to ask, because I'm like, look, I'm not about to, because I'm going to talk about a church, y'all. So if this is going to offend you, God bless. This is not going to work out. But I found a lot of them that don't put it on their website once we talk, and they like, yeah. I'm like, but thank you for being honest. But where are the ones that can explore? For some clients, they're like, I already know, I don't want to identify with this anymore, but I want to explore African spirituality. I want to explore human design. I want to explore tarot. Where are the ones? So thank you for signing up and saying we are the ones, and there's more of us. Thank you for what will come out of this, with the table extending, so to speak. And thank you all for listening and commenting and just adding to it. And thank you, listeners, for doing the hard work for yourselves. This is not easy to rebuild after we've been demolished from so much, from the intersectionality of systemic racism and religious trauma and all the gambit. So I just want to say thank you for this. That's my big takeaway, that we could come together, egos aside, right, in different places, and do the damn thing. So I want to say that. And one more thing, I don't know if this is the place for it, but we want to continue this. Um, we are resetting again and offering our free support group space under the banner of the Black Religious Trauma Recovery Network. And we're starting back up in September. September 12th is the next event. So hopefully Biani and Sequoia can put the links there. If not, you can find us on Instagram at Surviving the Black Church. We have links there as well. We have a Facebook group called Surviving the Black Church. We have the podcast. And we're also looking to do some group coaching in October. So if any of that interests you, I'm pretty sure the ladies will get all the links to you. Not to put a plug in for ourselves, but it's going to take a village
No,
to do
please
this work.
plug. This is where we ask y'all to share where folks can find y'all. So
Yes,
plug away.
yes. So yes, the Surviving the Black Church podcast on Instagram, on Facebook, the meetup group. The link will be there for those who want to join. It's every second Thursday and the fourth of Thursday of the month for about 90 minutes, and we just talk about some of these topics. We haven't even gotten into the topics about deliverance, the deliverance ministry, and our sexual orientation. Child, we're gonna do it on the podcast. I mean, that's some crazy, that's like jumping off of a cliff, but we have to have those conversations. If we're going to come home to ourselves, we have to talk about what hindered us from coming home to ourselves. So these type of topics we have in the free support a group space. And if you are interested in the group coaching that we will be doing in October, we'll send the links out as well for that. And find us. I'm Nikki G Speaks. You can find me on NikkiGSpeaks.com. And then I'll let Hugh and Jonathan put their plugs in. Okay, I'm going to shut up.
You can just find me. Schoolboy Hugh is on most of my handles. My website is currently blooming. It's called theproblemwithempathy.com. It might change, but so yeah, you can go there. It's probably going to be parked at the moment, but go there in a month or two, is what I'm saying. And yeah, you can just schoolboy_Hugh. It was like 10 years ago. Schoolboy Q. I was really into the rapper, and so I thought it was cute, and it's just never changed it. So yeah, that's my handles on like pretty much everything. And then follow me on Amazon for book release. Just type my name in. I have a book. It's a Game of Cookie Thrones. It's like from 4 years ago. It has nothing to do with this. But that's like how you'll find me. So follow for book release information, and I would say email, but not yet. So hold up. Thank you.
Oh, I'm Jonathan at Atone Therapy. You could just type my name, Jonathan Carrington. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, uh, Facebook, sorta, but I'm looking to offer some kind of therapeutic offerings as well within the Black Religious Trauma Recovery Network. Still trying to work out the details of that, but so stay tuned. Sign up for for updates on the IG page for Surviving the Black Church, and we will be posting updates there. But other than that, yeah, that's pretty much it.
You should follow Jonathan on LinkedIn. He just reminded me of LinkedIn. He has got like the most beautiful, eloquent posts and information and guidance. And so you should go to Jonathan, everyone, but Jonathan brought up LinkedIn. And so I was like, yeah, it is like, it is, he has the most beautiful stories every day that he pretty much posts. And so that are jam-packed with value and jam-packed with, oh my God, just follow Jonathan on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Follow me on LinkedIn too. I don't know if it has anything to do with the podcast, but follow me on LinkedIn.
I love that. Thank you all so much again for being here with us. And yeah, I just wanted to, you know, let folks know that we're going to keep this conversation going. It sounds like, we already have part two kind of planned out. For those that are joining us in the comments, that either this is your first time with us, please know that you are a part of the podcast community. So please join us, whenever we are live. We would love to have you back here, especially when Surviving the Black Church podcast comes back as well. Let's see. Continue to share your thoughts and comments in the comments section, especially for those that are a part of the replay gang. Let us know what you think about the topics that we talked about, and join us for our next episode in 2 weeks. We'll continue to talk about again these topics related to religious trauma and centering the experiences, treatment, advocacy, and tools related to religious trauma.
And thank you again, y'all, for being in community with us and supporting a heart-centered podcast by two queer Black femme healers and spiritual social workers who explore the intersection of magic, spirituality, mental health, and everything in between. And if you're new here, we want you to stay. So stay connected, because we're all about building the spiritual practitioner and healing community. Subscribe to our channel, like this episode, share it with your friends, with your mamas, with your parents, share it with your church mamas. See if start your recovery journey now. Share it with all your people so we can get this healing on, y'all. And then please stay connected, because we have some new episodes coming, and part 2 is coming. Also, we have a free newsletter that is pretty good, we would say, where we kind of do deep dives on these conversations. It's First Quarter Moon newsletter. They're going to start going out twice a month, so you want to stay connected and, go into some deep dives with us. And we're also on IG, Reclaiming Soul Work, and we're also on TikTok, Reclaiming Soul Work. Thank you so much for being here, y'all. We're really so grateful for Surviving the Black Church podcast. And we are going to have a part 2. And for those, we'll see you next time. How about that? Take care, everybody. Bye.